Tommy, it is a pleasure to have you in two dimensions in front of me. How are you?
Good, mate. Very good. Yeah, I know it is two dimensions, isn't it? It's what a weird world we live in.
Yeah, we've been trying, despite the city of Melbourne and the world opening up, we've been trying to touch and feel each other for a number of weeks now, and it's proved challenging. So we thought, stick to what we know, which is Zoom, right?
Totally. Yeah, but we've got a coffee organised for this Friday, my friend. So it's going to happen.
Very exciting. And, in amongst our two-dimensional conversations, we were really, workshopping some great ideas, and one of them being to put together a little bit of some teamwork and to be able to bring our minds together, no pun intended, being the Mind Mate podcast, and being able to join forces and really just kind of flesh out exactly what we think about on a daily basis and see how we can essentially just vomit pearls of wisdom out, if we can, to for people to listen to, right?
Mate, absolutely. For just for a bit of context, Paul and I used to work together. Coaching CrossFit. You were predominantly a personal trainer. I don't think you took classes.
I used to take classes quite a bit. I actually used to run that facility before before Ezra came on board. In between owners and managers, I was running that facility. But predominantly a personal trainer and health coach, and I've been in the industry for now 20 years.
Yeah, mate, 20 years. Yeah, shit. Yeah, I was born about 20 years ago.
Correct. So I'm not actually a veteran. I'm a dinosaur.
Yeah. Paul's actually my father.
No joke.
That's right. Yeah, but we met, so that would have been, 2017, I think it was, late 2017, and just, hit it off straight away. I think you and I were always destined to be good mates, and we just had so much to talk about, from the very beginning, from the genesis of our friendship. And you had a podcast at that time.
Yes, I did. It was called My Wellness Wishlist, and I'm actually working on reformatting a lot of those interviews to be able to reappropriate it for the Hero Life podcast, so I can basically give the audience that currently listens to us the takeaways that I had with the 100+ guests that I had, including Wim Hof and a whole bunch of other guests. And there's tremendous crossover, given that you've also had a past podcast where you've been able to interview some tremendous guests with incredible minds.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the thing, isn't it, man? Like I think, because I was doing that podcast at the time, and you're exactly right. There was so much crossover within our own experiences and therefore our own kind of ideas, our perspectives, the way we see the world, what we kind of want to give to the world as our own kind of personal gift reflected in our work, which I think led to some of these conversations. But it's so we would speak all the time. We spoke a lot about spirituality, psychology, personal development, and I kind of stumbled upon, I'd seen, because we would speak every once in a while, and I saw the stuff you were doing with Hero, with helping parents. And to me, that really spoke to me. I see a lot of parents in the clinic that I work in as well. And there are these almost two separate kind of paradigms of dysfunction that I was noticing for men and women. That was one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to pick your brain on this sort of stuff and see where we could come together to riff about it. I was noticing that a lot of men were kind of self-sacrificing their own visions and ideals as kind of like a negative 180 swing, moving away from the also negative tyrannical aspect of, well, I'm just going to work all day and then you stay home with the kids sort of thing. Now there's almost too much of that, and like, I don't know who I am anymore, and I feel like there's got to be some sort of ethical selfishness associated with that. And then for women as well, I'm sure there's a Sarah Jessica Parker film about this, but this kind of like archetypal idealizing of the boss mum, who can do it all, and no one can fucking do it all, and why would you want to do it all? You'd want to enjoy your life. And I think I mean, the global disorder that we're all facing is doing too much, you know, but I'm sure you're noticing that in some of the work you do. But yeah, in general, mate, just so much for you and I to talk about, and what better way to do that than to produce some content.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that our genesis has come from, you know, working the human body, something that I still have a tremendous passion for. And I feel like, you know, being in this industry for so long, you know, people really go a couple of different ways. They either like drill down and really specialize heavily into human function and the biomechanics, etc. Or they begin to really explore that mind-body connection and then delve further into the mind. And I feel like we really have a commonality there in being able to explore that. And, you know, going along with the theme of what you were discussing when it comes to transitioning to parenthood, I feel like there is a definite perceived there's a commonality that a lot of people that mothers and fathers alike that I deal with, where there's that perception of loss when they transition into parenthood. And that can be a really, really difficult time, a beautiful time as well, because, you know, an entirely new human being is born from you and your partner, and it's wonderful, and it's scary, and it's threatening, and it's magical all at the same time. So you're getting all these conflicting emotions and feelings, and you think you need to be feeling overjoyed 100% of the time, and you feel guilty for not feeling overjoyed 100% of the time. But ultimately, it's hard. It's bloody hard. But wrapped up in all of that is so much reward, you know. But the theme that I do see is this self-sacrifice that takes place, and that can be a really challenging thing, because one day people who have transitioned into that parenthood wake up and they're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. You know, I've lost my sense of identity, and I've seen that so many times. So to have a healthy relationship with yourself during this process can be an incredibly rewarding experience, and not only a rewarding experience for you, but you get to be able to teach your children and your children's children generationally how to be able to do this and be a really, really healthy role model if, you know, taken with awareness and acceptance.
Yeah. Look, I'm really excited for our conversations. So I think to give some people some background here, our plan is a little bit ambiguous at this stage, but we certainly know that there are conversations to be had, which I think will result in much more frequent catch-ups together to discuss these ideas. And we were talking about, you know, business collaborations and so forth. And I think we're excited by that, but I think it's all going to be generated from the podcast to see what happens here. But to kick things off straight away, you know, you mentioned something there about losing yourself, you know, by definition, as a result of self-sacrifice coming into parenthood. And that really kind of sparked my interest, because one of the areas that I love to deal with most in psychology is existentialism. And what is the self, you know, and I hear that a lot. I don't know who I am. And I've come to believe that you find yourself by looking forwards, because your identity is something it's very volatile, but it manifests as a result of your actions across time. So we were talking about jiu-jitsu just before the podcast, and right now, you know, potentially 3% of my identity has shifted to the degree that I now am someone that does jiu-jitsu, whereas prior to getting my white belt, I wasn't that person. So my identity is a whole bunch of things put together to make this costume. And this is the paradox of life when you go through major existential change, like becoming a parent, is that it is both terrifying and life regenerating. And what I mean by life regenerating is that a new life is generating. You know, you are a phoenix that emerges from the ashes. But that doesn't mean you have to completely dispense with everything that you had prior to parenthood. You know, there are some parts about that old identity that you might really still want to do. And it's about bringing that on and perhaps, redefining your identity based upon new goals that are, that are applicable to this identity of being a parent. The final thing I'll say here is there was a really interesting piece of work done by two psych authors in 1997, Nessie and Williams. I've cited this a whole bunch of times because it's one of my favorite things to talk about with people that have, persistent depression. Most psychologists, they said, found that depression tended to lift when people let go of these goals that had been defining them for many, many years. And what that tells me is that depression is kind of like a personal grievance. It's like, I'm still attached to this goal that I know will never be accomplished. I wanted to be a this, I wanted to be a that. I wish, you can see how so much of that is associated with parenthood. Well, I can't never do this anymore. Who do I want to be? And it's about grieving this old self so that this new self can emerge.
It's fascinating, and this all resonates so heavily into the world that I am really, really heavily, placed in right now. And this whole sense of carving out your own identity and having the power to be able to carve out your future and present identity is such a powerful thing that everybody has the power to be able to do. And then it gets reverse engineered back into, and I'm big on coaching a lot of my mothers and fathers through creating change through habits and being able to create shift through habits. But I strongly believe that habits will not be adhered to in a consistent manner if you don't take full ownership of this identity that you want to be able to step into. That is the driving force. It's this identity that you can really, really step into. And, the world is your stage. You have the ability to be able to shift into whatever identity you want to do. And the second thing I want to mention is that's particularly relevant to my life and amongst conversations I've been having with friends in my position right now is the absence of rituals and things that gave us joy and that may still give us joy. And, I've been kind of specifically reaching for certain things that have really activated that joy for me recently. Like I was just saying before we pressed record, I went footy training on the weekend.
Yeah.
And buzz, yes, I'm a 40-year-old old man by football standards, right? I feel great, and but the reason I bring this up is because when I was out on that training track, I felt alive, like electric, and it gave me 100% unbridled joy. I thought I was going to lose a lung, but but it was coupled with unbridled absolute joy, and that feeling has actually it's now Tuesday afternoon, and it's maintained since Sunday afternoon, and it's elevated my presence and my status within myself for such a period of time that it's undeniable. Like I want to keep doing more of that until I lose a leg or something.
Actually lose a lung.
or actually lose a lung. Exactly right. So doing things that give you joy, tapping into those deep wells that can actually give you these types of things, or simply just, being able to trace back to things that used to give you joy. They may not give you joy anymore, but they might also, all the same.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? So what I'm trying to play devil's advocate with someone who might be hearing that and going, I've heard that before, it's sure, I just got to do things that make me happy. But then, so what are some objections to that idea if you faced any? Yeah, sure. Okay. So, when you're deep in the baby cave, let's look at, being a father, a parent. Sure, yeah.
When you're deep in the baby cave, you're like, yeah, sure, okay, I'm going to go piss off for 5 hours and play a game of footy, head down the pub with my mates while the missus is back, looking after.
Sounds like a great life.
Yeah, exactly right. But it may not be, it may not be available at this very point in time, and if it is available, it may not look like an entire afternoon. So, I've dealt with clients in the past where I've asked them, "What makes you feel free the most?" And I'll just reference a conversation that I had with a client not so long ago, and he's like, being in rural Canada, this guy's from America, in the wilderness in America or Canada, and just being off charts, what's the word I'm looking for? Off the grid.
Yes.
Off the grid for like a week or two. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. Now, you probably can't do that every week. Sure. But how can you achieve that feeling? Because we're not after actually going to America. We're after the feeling that you get when you go off grid in the States. How can you achieve that feeling, but in another environment? Is it going once a month to the Dandenongs and going hiking there, or the Yuyangs, and then back for, doing a 4 or 5 hour round trip and then finding yourself back home? That seems a lot more accessible, and you get a taste of what it's like. Are you familiar with the strength and conditioning dude Paulo Tsutsoulan?
No.
So he's a dude, and he's got a great name.
Yes.
And he has a concept called greasing the groove. And the concept basically comes from, let's say you're looking at being able to achieve a 200 kilogram deadlift.
Yep.
The idea of being able to just every couple of hours pick up a 100 kilo bar and just grease the groove, being able to recruit the muscles in a much less, in the same range of motion, but less load, essentially. Sure. Let's attribute that to your own lifestyle and your mind, Do you see the delineation there? The 200 kilo deadlift bar might be being off grid in the wilderness in the United States, somewhere in, I don't know, Joshua Tree or something like that. But the 100 kilo greasing the groove aspect might be going to the Yuyangs and being back for dinner.
Yep. That's a great point. It's, that is exactly right, isn't it? And you often find something that you made mention of, this idea of like, you can't be that free. It can't be a week, but it can be something. And one of the things that I like this idea of like playing into or being curious about what the greener grass is, and then finding a healthy balance there. Because all mental dysfunction is basically just rigid thinking, being unable to let go of whatever this thing is, if it's sadness and tears or anger or some sort of intrusive thought. It's very easy for us to conceptualize greener grass. So I just wish I could, or the classic question, well, if you had a magic wand, what would it look like? What would life look like for you? How would your girlfriend or your boyfriend be different? What would they be, all that kind of stuff. And I just wish they did this, or I just wish my life was like this, or, because you're exactly right. We're chasing a feeling, that's, this neurochemistry's been around for 210 million years. Mammals are very, very old. Cars and porn and food and shopping, that's all new stuff, but it's the same neurochemistry. But sometimes just thinking about the greener grass and then finding a healthy balance between your actual situation and what you want can be enough.
Absolutely. And you talk about this greener grass, is the grass greener on the other side, or is the grass greener where you water it?
Right.
And how do you water it? Can you water the concept and that feeling of freedom by simply journaling about it?
Right.
By closing your eyes and meditating on it, by having an incredibly emotive, in-depth conversation with your partner about, planning a trip at some stage and just getting excited together for the concept. There are so many ways that you can elicit that dopamine response within your body. Like you said, we're creatures that have evolved over millennia, like multiple hundreds of millions of years. So to think that we only have one way, all we're after is creating that chemical response within our body, right? Yep. How can we do that without jumping on a plane and taking a month out of our lives? And there's nothing wrong with doing that if it's possible, Yes. I think that's great, but let's be practical as well.
Yes, yeah, and I also think about sustainability as well. One variation of your identity, to bring it back to parenthood, and I'm not a father yet, but one aspect of your identity probably really likes being a parent. There's like a psychoanalytic idea. There's all these other forces in you that want all these other things, but one of them, that's a fair stakeholder. They got a major share of the company here.
Yeah,
they like being a parent. So if you can balance out all these other forces, potentially it's easier said than done, but ask for help, use strategies, you can already see how these conversations are going to play out. I think that could be good.
I love it. And I love where you're going with that as well, because as we mentioned before, you're dealing with this sense of loss of time, independence, ability to be able to piss off to the other side of the world. But in the same breath, you've gained so much. You've been able to, every moment you're at home or you're in the presence of your children, you get to role model and you get to mold the mind of a young one to be able to create practices that can inspire, and that's an incredible gift and a privilege to be able to do. And you'll bugger it up from many times over as well, but that's all part of the fun as well. So with loss comes gain and gifts, and it's a hell of a journey. That's for sure.
That is a really great point. I think with loss comes gain. I think we have a real tendency to perhaps pedestal being free. We might even look back on our past of partying in our early 20s, like teens, no responsibilities. It's like, well, that was the good life. Now I've got all these responsibilities and I have to go to work, and it's downhill from here. But the other, the negative side to having a life without responsibilities is that there's no kind of meaning or purpose associated with that. No, responsibility is wonderfully, you wake up every day and you have people that rely on you, or perhaps you've got some kind of major position at work, or you're doing something that's really important to you. Sure, there's responsibility and discipline and a whole lot of stress associated with that, but at least you're someone doing something, as opposed to being a young kid who's essentially a nobody doing anything. And I don't mean to sound harsh, because, I see a lot of young people, but it's a time of pure potential.
Yeah.
But potential is like it's dormant. It's like a volcano that hasn't erupted yet. It could be anything, but it's actually not anything yet.
Yeah, which means it could be, which means it could be anything and everything.
Exactly.
And it's beautiful. Sorry, I'll let you finish your thought.
No. You're exactly. And it is exciting to be in that phase, because there's youth associated with that. There's the rest of your life, ahead of you. Like, who do you want to be? What do you want to do? It's so exciting. But there's a lot of struggle because of the availability of choice with that. The classic analogy is the Netflix scenario. How hard is it to pick a movie? It's impossible, because there's so many options.
And do you remember, and this is another really, really, I romanticized about this so much. When something comes on network TV, right? Like an old, like a TV show, like a movie from the 2000s or the 90s, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know, Home Alone 2's on. I've got to watch this. Like it's on at 8:30 on Saturday night. I'm staying home and I'm watching it. I still do that. Like when it's on network TV, because it's on. I know I can access it on Netflix or you know, in my logical mind. But it's like this romance of it being there and available. But like but I've never watched it on Netflix, because we do have so much choice and we're spoiled for choice, and we can't sit down and go through a series because, you know, we don't give it a chance, and that can be like a real metaphor for life, because we just have so like this abundance of things that are so available to us. We don't just invest in one path fully, you know.
It's so true. I mean, you know, people even, you know, myself included, you know, I'm a human being, and, you know, sometimes it's even hard to get through an entire movie on Netflix, you know, but at least with watching a movie on network TV, as you say, with ads in the middle of it, it creates that kind of like open loop anticipation for the next scene, you know, and too much of a good thing, as you said before, in a world filled with pleasure. I got this from reading Brave New World. The guy who wrote the intro to that said, in a world where everything is available, nothing has any meaning. You know, very, very interesting metaphor for kind of what we're living through right now, you know, and gives rise to things called dopamine detoxes and all sorts of fun, you know, internet things.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I think, you know, you mentioned that we're, you know, this whole grass is greener thing, and where, you know, we're designed to think. Like our brains and our bodies are designed to think about the worst case scenario. We're not designed to be happy. We're designed to survive.
Yes.
And survival is thinking about surviving threats. And we're always designed, like up until how long ago? 200 years ago, there were real threats that were going to, you know, kind of kill us and our families. And I feel like, you know, within us, we're designed to be able to to be on high alert to be able to do this. So, you know, to be able to hack that system is going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of effort to be able to do. We've definitely gone on tangents, but I love it.
Well, this is all part of it, you know. I think, it's no, but you're exactly right. I mean, just to play off that a little bit, you know, I think, you know, they say often, this is certainly true from a neurochemical perspective, is that progress is the ultimate sense of fulfillment. You know, how do you kind of push out progress so that it becomes this, you know, thing that you're working on for the rest of your life? But we all know this, you know, you're feeling okay. There's a bit of a struggle there, but it's kind of the perfect mechanism for flow. When you're studying and then you do your exam and you feel happy, because that's where you feel the most serotonin. Everything is good as it is. Yeah. And then 5 minutes later, there's like a new mountain that needs to be climbed. Oh, well, I'm hungry. Oh, I should be doing this. And, you know, so it's that sense of progress that I think we want the most. And the interesting thing, I think, I remember you and I spoke extensively about Viktor Frankl when we used to hang out together.
Yes.
And he said that what's so good about, you know, a struggle in life, and he was the psychiatrist, I think he was, but he developed logotherapy. Probably the most influential 20th century psych. I reckon a lot of people would say that. He was certainly incredible. Survived Auschwitz, I think it was, in the Holocaust. Certainly was at a camp. I'm pretty sure it was Auschwitz. Yep. He was writing The Doctor and the Soul in there. He said that was his purpose, to stay alive, you know. And he also wrote Man's Search for Meaning. But one of the things he speaks about is how responsibility and struggle kind of pulls you back, so it makes it harder to achieve your goal, therefore more worthwhile, fulfilling when you do achieve it. You know, and there are so many interesting different ways that people basically say the same thing. I remember reading Stephen King's memoir, you know, and he's written 40, 50 plus books, including short stories and all sorts of stuff. And the vast majority of them have been made into movies, you know, incredible, probably one of the greatest writers. And there was a part in the book where he was talking about how every writer, and this spoke to me, every writer loves this idea of being in a cabin in the middle of the woods with like a butler who makes you all your food and you've got all the time to write. But he said, when he thought about it, having kids and having responsibilities actually led to him writing more because it made it so much more challenging yet fulfilling to do it. So he was carving out hours that he probably wouldn't have done if he had all the time in the world. So interesting stuff.
It is, and I feel like those perceived barriers that come up within your life, they're stimulus for you to create. They're adversity, and I think science is showing us that humans thrive in adversity. If we get too comfortable, as well as from not just a mental perspective, but a biological perspective. If we were not to go through these stages of hormesis to be able to get past these discomfort levels, we're not going to evolve. We're not going to if we species that got too comfortable just died.
Yes.
Right. Species that would have metaphorical butlers in cabins would not be around for very long. The butlers would probably survive.
True, the butlers. Yes, very true. Well, so what are some of your goals and ideas about where these conversations will take us, mate?
Well, I think this has been a really great start because we've just kind of spoken a little bit about commonality, being able to help parents, but I feel like we can and then we've gone on a number of different tangents, which I love.
Yes.
And we've just talked about the meaning of life, which I also love.
Straight into it.
Straight for the jugular. And I think it'd be great to be able to just kind of come up with some themes that interest us, that interest the audience as well. I think it would be great to be able to throw some questions out to the audience as well and ask you guys, what do you want to hear from us? What kind of conversations would you like to get our insights from? And what questions would you like to be asked? Because we're ultimately after being able to satisfy or to be able to, I suppose, elicit conversation, not just between us through this two-dimensional mental masturbation, but to be able to be able to have conversations with you guys as well. So they're my thoughts.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I think for a long time, I think you said a couple of weeks ago when we were having a chat, the podcast world, entrepreneurial world in itself can be a lonely thing sometimes. It's fun to do solo shows every now and then. It's also fun to really do things and build things with friends.
Agreed.
I'm really excited about it, mate. I think we'll just have to see where it takes us.
I completely agree. And, we can go down the mental path, we can go down the physical path. The fact that you're just exploring this physical expression of yourself. And I know when you left personal training a number of years ago, you found yourself kind of inactive for a period of time. And it took the context of martial arts and being able to engage in this form of training for you to find that passion again. And since then, you've re-engaged in strength training, etc. But I feel like the instigator, the impetus was engaging in the dance of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Mate, that is something that I would love to talk about more for sure. You're exactly right. I was identified as a CrossFit athlete. 1 year I did really well in the CrossFit Open. I was training for many hours a day, and that was who I was. And then when I started to have this nudge and this pull to, start exploring the inner landscape, it took me by storm, and I became obsessed with it. And I think now, having found jiu-jitsu, what I've really noticed is that jiu-jitsu kind of attracts weirdos, and I love weirdos. But they're not necessarily. You might, 1 in 20 people might do jiu-jitsu because they actually want to learn how to fight, and that's great. I believe anyway that if you really know how to fight, you're actually less of a threat. because I feel like a lot of bullying comes from insecurity. So, that old expression, better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. It's a very thing. I'm just getting over a cold, guys. Sorry about that. But for me, it was a way to physically learn about myself, and I do jiu-jitsu because it teaches me about my relationship with fear, because there's lots of moments when you get very claustrophobic, when someone's holding you down. That's the perfect prerequisite for not only a fight or flight threat response, but also a freeze response, because you can't fight or flight because they're better than you and they're holding you down because they're in a better position. So what do you do? And I've, learning about, breathing and the autonomic nervous system. And that's played a major role in helping clients with anxiety, because so much anxiety, you and I could talk for days about CBT and these kind of evidence-based methods that, let's kind of dispel your thoughts and, and bring them back to their kind of traumatic root cause. But at the end of the day, you wouldn't be in that kind of heightened state if your breathing was regular. So why don't we focus more on the exhale to do the opposite of the parasympathetic, and we'll see what happens there. But jiu-jitsu is just phenomenal for that introspection.
And that's a bottom-up, top-down philosophy that we can definitely explore in future episodes, being able to understand that you can't divide your body and your mind, and you have options abundant to be able to use your example, alleviate stress and anxiety. You can use your body's deeply evolved technology and mechanisms to be able to elicit a response in your mind and your mood. And people don't necessarily think about it that way, but opportunities are abundant to be able to cultivate a mood and disposition and a mental process that you want to be able to achieve.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's one of the reasons why, what you and I are both so excited about where this might take us. I think just with your background, extensive knowledge of the body, and then how that plays into mental health and then loops back into health in general, I think is something that's going to be so fun exploring. But man, I think the fact that I can't stop coughing is probably a good sign to perhaps call off the welcome episode.
We'll wind this up, but that's been great, really, really good, and looking forward to the next episode. We'll get together and maybe pose some questions out to our individual communities and see what types of kind of questions come up, and maybe that can guide us for future episodes. But really pumped for this, Tommy boy.
Yeah, no, it'll be great, mate. And like we said in the beginning, any chance to catch up again is always going to be good too. So
100%. That's going to be
cool. All right, guys. Well, great to chat, Paulie. Great to chat.
Great to chat with you, Tom, and thank you so much for listening, guys, and taking the time. And once again, we have podcasts individually that our objective is to be able to get them to as many listeners as possible. So it'd be so great if you guys could listen, review, like, all the rest of it with both the Mind Made podcast and the Hero Life podcast, because this is stuff that we do and we know, and it makes a difference when you guys, engage in and write a review to it, because it just gives us the opportunity to be able to send our voice out to more and more people.
Totally. It's so true. Yeah. We'll see where it goes.
Awesome, Tom.
Cool.